series. This class is about green theory. But before starting, I want to give you a brief introduction about myself. My name is Srishti Mukherjee. I have qualified NTA UGC NET exam in English literature 4 times and have also qualified West Bengal SET examination. I have 3 years of teaching experience. Moreover, I have also taught in NPTEL online course from IIT Madras 3 times. Currently, I am working as TGT English at Rajkamal Saraswati Vidya Mandir, Dhanbad. This is the link of my Telegram channel. The link is also given in the description box. So those of you who have not joined yet, please join to get notification of all important classes. And also please don't forget to like, share and subscribe my YouTube channel so that many more new learners can join. So today's class is about green theory. Now, green theory is not a very new term, but we are more familiar with the term eco-criticism. Basically, eco-criticism and green theory, they are related to each other, but not exactly the same. So first of all, you need to know what is green theory all about. So if we look at the definition of green theory, then we can easily say that green theory, the term green itself indicates that it is a theory which is based on ecology, which is based on environment, the protection of environment and all the things associated with nature. So it is a theory based on ecology. We have already read about eco-criticism. So eco-criticism was popular in America and in UK, in Britain. This theory, eco-criticism, became popular as green theory during the 20th century. Now, then the question might arise that is there no difference between green theory and eco-criticism? If both are same, then why are we explaining it again? No, it has a bit difference, and green theory is associated with a lot more terms, new terms, which we will discuss. It is a part of eco-criticism, but eco-criticism has a limited boundary, whereas if we talk about green theory, then it expands the boundary, including all manners of works, which means not only in terms of literature, but in terms of environmental activists, in terms of research on environment, in terms of philosophy, in terms of films. So each and everything associated with nature that is connected with green theory. So green theory is not only limited to literature, but it has expanded the boundaries of eco-criticism. Now, if we talk about green theory, then the first question comes that what is nature? Nature is at the center point. You can very well understand this fact when we discussed about eco-criticism also. In that particular theory also, we have talked about how nature is variously interpreted in literature. And eco-criticism mainly focused on different point of views associated with nature and how nature is reflected by literary masters. Each and every season is reflected by literary masters in their works. But when it comes to green theory, there are so many interpretations of nature. So we can take 3 major interpretations of nature in the context of green theory. First of all, nature as the best physician. This is also a very popular dictum which was mainly popularized by William Wordsworth. Wordsworth mentioned that yes, nature is the great healer. In each and every poems written by Wordsworth, you will find that Wordsworth has worshipped nature, as well as he has mentioned that nature is the great healer. If you go to nature with a lot of problems in your mind, then your mind will be refreshed and you will get new breath, new ideas from nature. So nature is a source of creativity. Nature is the best physician. So that idea is taken by the green theorist also, that nature as the best physician. Second interpretation is nature as an uncultivated wild area, which means nature in its raw form. Nature in its raw form. which is not invaded by anyone, which is not touched by human civilization. That nature, the primitive, wild nature. And third is as a picturesque countryside, the description which are very popular in romantic poetry and also in other poems associated with it. The picturesque countryside, the beautiful countryside, as we also get in the descriptions of Thomas Hardy's novels, the beautiful description of Wessex, a lonely place, the Egdon Heath, and all the other things, the villagers, small cottages, the picturesque countryside. So, nature is interpreted in three types in green theory. And if we talk about the essence of green theory, then it debates nature in order to defend it. Debates nature means it questions that which interpretation of nature is valid and how should I consider it. Because if we take nature as a picturesque countryside, then the wildness inside it, the rawness inside it, that should not be taken into consideration, right? Because both ideas are contradictory. And if we take nature as the best physician, then this idea is automatically different from the other two. So, green theory focuses on this particular question. It debates about nature. Nature is the central idea, and nature is not so simple that containing all the plants and animals, and nature is considered as mother nature, and up to that the definition is finished. No. Green theory questions the existence of nature, the importance of nature, and how should we look at nature as a part of human civilization, how nature is related to our life, how nature is related to the advancement of society, and how nature can shape our mindset. All these things are part of green theories. So the critics said that green theory debates nature in order to defend it. Okay, this is about the basic description. Now comes the idea of the pastoral. We are all familiar with the term pastoral, right? You have read about pastoral comedies of Shakespeare. You have read pastoral stories also, pastoral novels also. So we are all familiar with the term pastoral. Now, this particular term is more closely associated with green theory than with eco-criticism. Now, what is the idea of pastoral? If we look at the etymological meaning of the word, then the word pastoral comes from the word pastor. It's a Greek word. Pastor, it means shepherd. Shepherd. Now, if we look at the definition of pastoral life, then what does it mean? We all know that pastoral life refers to the very simple, down to earth, humble lifestyle of the shepherds or the village people or the villagers in the lap of nature. So, in one sentence, we can say that pastoral refers to a lifestyle which is free of the complexities of city life, free from all kinds of tension, and there is only romanticism, only nature, and surrounded by nature. That is pastoral. Now, in green theory, it is considered that the first eco-critical work in Britain is written by Raymond Williams. You all know the name of Raymond Williams, the famous Marxist critic. So, Raymond Williams has written another work, The Country and the City. So, this work is considered as the first important eco-critical text in Britain, in UK. And this text is considered as one of the originators of green theory. Now, if we look at Williams' Country and the City, then we will also find that Raymond Williams has made a clear-cut distinction between the country life and the city life. Right? We will talk about it in some other class about the text. Now comes the idea of pastoral. What is pastoral in the context of green theory? Now, another theorist name is prominent here, that is Jonathan Bate. Jonathan Bate has written a book called Romantic Ecology, and there he talked about Wordsworth. Analyzing Wordsworth's work, we simply denote Wordsworth as nature poet or as the worshipper of nature. Now, the definition is not so simple. Right? Jonathan Bate mentions that if we analyze Wordsworth's poems, then you will see that Wordsworth had a radical pastoralism, very radical, very rigid, environmental and social responsibility. He is also talking about the fact. He is personifying nature, he is describing nature as the great healer, and he also talks about the social responsibility of human beings towards nature. That is not directly mentioned, but that is indirectly given, indirectly presented in Wordsworth's poems. He is a representative of radical pastoralism. Now, Jonathan Bate in Terry Gifford's work, Pastoral, he identifies that pastoral works, or if we talk about the green writings, then it can be of three types. Green theories or the green text, that can be of three types. One is pastoral, simply denoting the pastoral lifestyle. Another is anti-pastoral. Anti-pastoral means which is something against the romantic description of pastoralism, which means that it is also highlighting the drawbacks of uh, too much primitive life, too much simple life. It is also pointing out the negative aspects of pastoralism. And post-pastoral. Post-pastoral means that it refers to the time of industrialization or modernization, that after pastoral, when we are detached from the pastoral setting, when we are not a part of nature as such, then what will happen? So in green theories, we take into consideration these three types of writings: pastoral, anti-pastoral, and post-pastoral. I hope this is clear. Now comes another work. This is a very interesting work written by Lawrence Buell. They are all the green theorists. Lawrence Buell has written a work called The Environmental Imagination, subtitled as Thoreau, Nature Writing and the Formation of American Culture, published in 1995. So Lawrence Buell, he talks about Henry David Thoreau. You know that he is very famous for writing the work Walden. And Walden is actually Thoreau's own experiences of living within nature. Thoreau's own experiences. Now, Lawrence Buell is analyzing this work, Walden, very critically. And he mentions that in Walden, Thoreau is obviously talking about his own experience. And you all know that Henry David Thoreau is a part of transcendentalist movement in America, which is considered as very closely associated with British Romanticism. We have already discussed about transcendentalism. Now, Walden or subtitle is Life in the Woods. The work Walden, it is subtitled as Life in the Woods. And if we look at the basic summary of the text, then here Henry David Thoreau is talking about the natural surroundings. And basically he spent 2 months near Walden Pond, and in that particular solitary landscape, he got the idea of self-reliance, which is later elaborated by Ralph Waldo Emerson also. So the idea of self-reliance, the idea of solitude, the idea of spiritual discovery, all these are part of Walden. And Walden is actually recommended to Henry David Thoreau by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it is situated in Massachusetts. So basically, this is the story. This is the backdrop of the work, Walden. Now, green theorist Lawrence Buell analyzed this work from the perspective of green theory. So he mentions that Walden is not simply the recordings of Thoreau's own life or Thoreau's own realization. It is not about his traveling and he is narrating his own experiences. No. Here he has given a very significant feature or a significant point, that what it means to be with nature, what it means to be with nature, and he has suspended his own self. It is not about his personal experience, rather he moves to a generalized, a universal point of view, mentioning that what it means to be with nature. How can a man feel when he spends a lot of time in the lap of nature? And what kind of realization should he get? What kind of spirituality or any kind of realization which he feels? That is actually Walden. And Walden is so significant, Buell argues, that it has marked a shift from egological to ecological. Now, what does this two term mean? Egological, ecological. Now, egological, ego, you can clearly understand it is talking about I or my own self. Freud's ego, remember, we have done in psychoanalytic criticism. So, from egological to ecological, which means it is not about me. It is not about my own interpretation. It is not about my own life. Rather, it is shifted to ecological, which means generalized view of nature. So here nature is at the center point. Whewell is trying to say that here nature is at the center, not Thoreau. Thoreau is a common man. He is like an everyman. And what he feels in the lap of Walden, it is very similar to what any human being can feel in the lap of nature. So it is a kind of document, it is a kind of research how a human being can enjoy nature and how can you infer teachings of nature in your life. So it's a clear transition from egological, from my own experience, as we read autobiographical novels, that is egological, because that is talking about the writer's own life. The writer in his own voice, in his or her own voice, describing his lifestyle, the happenings which are there in his life. So it is a complete transition from egological to ecological, because their nature is at the center, the surroundings of the Walden pond is at the center, not Thoreau's own emotion, Thoreau's own experience, according to Lawrence Buell. Now, another important green theorist, Louis H. Wessling. Louis H. Wessling. Lewis talks about the idea of female experience with nature. Now, this is a very interesting fact where comes the theory of ecological feminism. We will discuss about this theory also in some other class. Ecological feminism. So, this is a very common interpretation that nature is termed as mother nature. Nature is termed as mother nature, which means that nature is a female entity. And in each and every literary text, you will find that nature is defined as mother nature, who is the protector, who is the healer, who is the preserver of life, whatever it is. But nature is associated with female entity. Nature is our mother. So Louis H. Wessling mentions about that thing, that how female experience is combined with nature. And an example was given by Wessling in his in the work The Green Breast of the New World: Landscape, Gender and American Fiction, published in 1996. This is the work written by Wessling. And here Wessling talks about the historical phenomena of American settlement. If you read the history of America, the divide between North America and South America, the apartheid movement and all these things. So Wessling talks about the North American settlement. They are the nomadic people, the tribal people. They are invading a virgin territory. The description is like that. It is also very popular in post-colonial interpretation also. That Mother India, or if we look at India as our motherland, then this is being invaded, this was being invaded by the Britishers. They are the foreigners, so they are destroying the honor of our virgin motherland. The interpretation can also be like this. And This is very familiar interpretation. If you listen to any patriotic song, if you listen to any patriotic slogan, then this thing is highlighted that Bharat Mata's honor is at stake. So all the people, all the Indians, they must be together. They must fight against the Britishers who are destroying the honor of our motherland. So again, the image of Bharat Mata and her honor is at stake. She is molested by the arrival of the Britishers, by any foreign group of people. So we Indians must fight against that. So this is a very sentimental portion of our patriotism, and we still believe in the concept of Mother India, right? So coming back to the idea of Wesleyan, Wesleyan is also mentioning the same thing, that when we are looking back the history of North American settlement, then the virgin nature is considered as a virgin woman who is forcefully invaded by the nomadic people, by the outsiders. And it is a clear case of molestation, if we see. So it is a kind of force versus feeling. Force is of the outsiders, of the foreigners, and feeling is associated with the natives, the motherland, the nature. So if nature is a female entity, then it is also a part of green theory or ecological feminism also, that it mentions the dichotomy between force and feeling. And it is a kind of dilemma also, that whether it is right or if this interpretation is right or not. Wesling is mentioning that thing. So now you can very well understand that green theory is not only related to some eco-critical text, it needs to extend the idea of what nature means in a broader way. Now, the term nature includes so many things with it. You can easily understand it from the discussion which we are having. Nature not only means only physical nature, nature is also associated with human nature. Remember the quotation of Pope, first follow nature and then your judgment frame. So that nature is not physical nature, that nature is human nature. So the term nature has a lot of meanings, and green theory wants to extend the boundaries by covering all the meanings together and giving it a uniform shape. That is about green theory. The boundary is very high. Now, if we look at green theory in perspective, so many other concepts are there. I am trying to sum it up so that you can understand, because I found green theory a bit complex. Eco-criticism I found easier to understand, but green theory is a very complex thing, as I believe. So I'm trying my best to simplify it for you as much as possible. Now, you are all familiar with this name, William Ruckert, right? Why? Because he has coined the term eco-criticism, and he is associated with Cheryl Glotfelty and Harold Fromm. Literature in the ecology, all these things we have already discussed. The origin of eco-criticism. Now, this man, William Ruckert, he was inspired by Kenneth Burke. Kenneth Burke is considered by most of the critics as the father of green theory. Now, why? We will talk about some ideas of Kenneth Burke, how he broadens the definition of nature. So, first of all, Kenneth Burke takes literary genres. What are the literary genres? Poems, novels, dramas, short stories, essays, etc., etc. So, Kenneth Burke says that if we take literature as nature, which means nature is equal to literature, both are similar. If we take it in that way, then the poems, he mainly focuses on the poems, because poems are, according to him, poems are the best places where you can show your creativity. And poems are more beautiful, more enjoyable to read than prose, essay, or drama, according to Kenneth Burke. So he mentions that if we consider nature is equal to literature, then poems are like the green plants that help us to create and that energy will create culture. What does that mean? Poems are like green plants. So you all know that plants are very much essential for our life. Plants give us so many things. Without plant, the world will destroy, or no single animal or human being can live. So Kenneth Burke mentions that poems are like the green plants. Why? Because poems help us to create. Poems encourage the creativity within us. And that creative energy will create culture. Obviously, right? Because if we consider literature as the mirror of the society, and if we make equal, literature is equal to poems according to Kenneth Burke, then obviously poems are showing the reality, poems are showing the message of the society, poems are representing the culture. Absolutely, this is true. So Burke is identifying in that way. Now look at the chain which Burke is trying to make between literature, nature, poems, culture. Right? All are equal. Nature is equal to literature. Literature is equal to poem. Poem is equal to creativity, and creativity is equal to culture. Right? Now there is a poem written by Burke. The poem is titled as Poem. Okay. There are some lines I have quoted here because these lines are very important to understand what he thinks about this green theory, because he is considered as the true originator of this theory. So he mentions that the definition of human being or the human civilization, very beautiful lines from the poem. Humans are the symbol making. I am highlighting the keyword. I will explain it also. Humans are the symbol making, symbol using, symbol misusing animal. Symbol making, symbol using, symbol misusing animal, separated from our natural condition by instruments of our own making, coded by the spirit of hierarchy and rotten with perfection. This is the definition of human beings given by Kenneth Burke. Now, I will explain this definition one by one. Look at the first line. Humans are the symbol making, symbol using, symbol misusing animal. What does that mean? The poet says that look at the idea of symbol. Symbol is equal to language, right? Symbol is equal to culture. So human beings, according to Kenneth Burke, human beings can make full sense by seeing ideas and utterances in the context of his body. Now comes another complex idea. Try to understand it very clearly. Human beings equal to symbol, equal to language, equal to body. Now, symbol, language, this is clear. Why body? Kenneth Burke says that the way we communicate with others, it is not only about our language, not only about the symbols, as we are the best animal of this world, we also use our sense, we also use our physical existence to communicate with nature. So the context of the body is also important when we talk about symbols. The body is inseparable from nature. Now, when body is associated with language, think about the non-verbal communication. You will understand that our body speaks more than our words. Right? Our facial expressions, our posture, the way we sit, the way we talk, it expresses a lot about us than the words which we are using. This is very true, right? Kenneth Burke is talking about that. Our body is closely associated with the language and the symbols and the utterances made by us. Now that body is inseparable from nature, we are all aware of the 5 elements with which our body is made. Right, air, water, sunlight, all these 5 elements are there. And it is also believed that after death, All these five elements return back to nature. And that is why all the ideas of funeral ceremonies are there. Some religion uses um, burial as funeral ritual. Some religion uses burning as funeral ritual. So whatever it is, the ultimate concept is same, that the five elements of our body return to nature, whether it is getting decomposed by the bacteria when the body is buried under the ground, whether it is by burning into ashes, the ashes returns to the soil and the materials are getting recycled. So whatever it is, but the idea is very clear that human body is made from nature and human body is inseparable from nature. Now comes the symbol. Basically, Kenneth Burke is highlighting the tribal language, which has a lot of symbols and signs, right? And we are almost forgetting that language, that tribal culture, that the rituals of tribal societies. These are all considered to be marginalized, and these are almost on the verge of oblivion. So he is mentioning that they are symbol making. Now look at the line. Human beings are symbol making, symbol using, and symbol misusing animal. Yes, obviously we are also misusing the opportunities of creating new ideas. We are misusing it. We are doing something wrong. We are abusing someone. We are using our words in a wrong sense. We are manipulating our own words. Symbol misuse. David Abraham mentions that the complex interchange we call language is rooted in the non-verbal exchange, I have just said, always already going on between our own flesh and flesh of the world. David Abraham says that the non-verbal communication, it is not that it is only going between two people when the conversation is going on, which means I'm talking with you and you are noticing my non-verbal expressions and you are getting an idea. No, that is not the fact. Even if when human beings are alone, even if when they are not communicating with anyone in front of them, communication is going on with nature. Right? Already, every time we are communicating with nature, and the flesh of the world, which means the flesh of nature and our own flesh. So our body is in a constant communication. We are not aware of that, but we are in each and every moment when we are taking oxygen, when we are living, when we are taking any kind of gift from nature, we are communicating. It is obviously non-verbalistic. So this is a very complex idea of language. It's not so simple that I am talking with you. My verbal words are only important and this is the language. No. David Abraham says that it's a very complex interchange. Right? Now what is the equation? Words is equal to situation. Words is equal to situation means as per the situation, we have to use words. Situations are always dramatic. Each and every situation gives us some new experience. And dramatic situation is equal to natural environment, which means nature is full of surprises. Whenever we are communicating with nature, we learn so many things, we learn so many situations, and we also realize how to handle that situation. Nature is the great healer, remember, which Wordsworth mentioned. Nature is the best teacher. Why? In this way. Nature is teaching us all these things. We are not aware of that. She is not the physical teacher sitting in front of you with a book and teaching you a particular topic. No, there is no lesson plan. There is nothing. There is no class. But nature is teaching you how with the situation, making you understand or making you able to understand different types of situation, dramatic moments, how to use words, how to communicate, how to be with yourself, how to highlight your self-respect, how to live in natural environment. Nature is teaching. This is green theory. Right? Now, look at the next part of the poem, separated from nature. Human beings are separated from nature. This is very true. Right? And this is the basically the major concern of all the green theorists and all the other environmental activists of today's world, that human beings are getting alienated from nature because of this modern technology. There is no need to explain it, you can very well understand. And what is the result of that? Due to the constant alienation from nature, we forget that human culture is an extension of nature. We are forgetting this thing that we are part of nature. Our culture, our religion, whatever it is we are following, it is an extension of nature. It is a gift of nature. And the language which we are using, that is having a dialogue with the earth. We are forgetting this. And as much as we are getting alienated from nature, the more we are alienated from nature, the more we are alienated from humanity, from morality, from all sorts of positive values. People are so much corrupted in today's world. Why? According to green theorists, it is because we are alienated from nature. Right? If there is a proper bonding, take another example, if there is proper bonding between teacher and student, and if student is loyal to his or her teacher, then he or she can learn each and everything very carefully. And the moment the student is creating distance with teacher, the student is not coming, not following the teacher's advice, that student will go to astray, because teacher's blessings will be wiped out. Right? So same thing is there. We are forgetting nature. Nature is our teacher, and we are not paying respect to her. That is why nature is also indifferent to us. Nature is showing all sorts of violent things. Nature is not protecting, rather nature is devastating us. See, the weather is getting too much hot. When there is rain, so there is torrential rain, it creates flood, it destroys everything. So it is a kind of revenge taken by the teacher also. That if you are not respecting me, then I am also not with you. Nature is behaving in that way. So it is the reason, this is the reason because of our alienation from nature. Now another theorist, Gregory Bateson, he has coined the term epistemological error. Epistemological error. What is the error? Bateson says that as we are getting alienated from nature, we are failed to see the mind. And human species can be understood in isolation of nature. We are believing that no, human beings are the superior, are the most superior thing in the world. So we can understand anything. Human beings can have a separate entity and we can live separately from nature. This is the error. And another error is that we cannot see through our mind, which means we cannot realize properly what is the contribution of nature in our life. There is another problem, coded with hierarchy. One line was there. So hierarchical psychosis, great chain of being. You are all aware of it. Great chain of being, remember? We have talked about it in our class of Macbeth, and we have also talked about it in our class of Dr. Faustus. This is the Renaissance idea, great chain of being, that human, animal, vegetable, insect, all of these things have a hierarchy. And when that hierarchy is getting disrupted, सबसे ऊपर में God, then human, then animal, all these hierarchies are there. And if someone is disturbing the hierarchy, then nature will be impacted. Remember in Macbeth, Macbeth is trying to be the king, and by murdering Duncan, he is trying to disturb that hierarchy. It was mentioned by the old man also that the falcon is eating the horse, or two owls are fighting, whatever, two horses are eating each other, whatever it is, the description. So it means that something is disturbed in the hierarchy of society, something is disturbed. It is in a topsy-turvy situation. Macbeth is trying to change that hierarchy. Macbeth is trying to attack a person who is next to God, the king. Faustus, he is a normal human being. Of course, he is very talented. He is the best scholar of the world. But Faustus is trying to be God. He is trying to invade in some other areas which are prohibited for him. He is trying to disturb the great chain of being, and ultimately he receives his punishment. So this kind of hierarchical psychosis is also there in nature. We are all aware of the ecosystem. You have already read about it. So in ecosystem, human beings also have a part. But we are forgetting, as we are getting alienated from nature, we are forgetting of this great chain of being. We are trying to project ourselves much powerful than nature, or more powerful than nature, and nature is taking revenge on us. So this is the hierarchical psychosis. Bateson is mentioning that these are the errors, epistemological errors, and these are the concerns of the green theorists: how to protect nature and how to use nature properly so that human civilization should be alive and should be protected. So this is about green theory. I hope you enjoyed the class. If you have any doubt, you can share your doubt in the comment section. I will try my best to clear this. So that is about green theory. I hope you have taken an overview of this, and you have also understood the difference between eco-criticism and green theory. The difference is very small or very narrow. Only you can say that eco-criticism is limited to literature, whereas not only to literature, eco-criticism also has a number of facets, but green theory analyzed it from all perspectives, not only from literature, but from environment, from geography, from science, from the perspective of films, from the common researches which are going on regarding environment and the protection of nature. Everything is a part of green theory, as well as the literary works which are focusing on nature. Okay, so that is about today's class. Thank you all for watching. Bye bye, and see you soon in some other video.